Okay, we're good.
All right.
And so when she died, thousands of people came to her funeral.
Yeah, and her and Jippy have written several books, so they are known around the country and around the world. Um, Another one of the thinkers that has influenced her is Emmanuel Wallerstein. He is what they call the world systems thinker. They have a whole movement of world systems thinking. And he analyzes capitalism. They wrote about it since it started in the 15th century, whatever. And now they see that it like all systems, it evolves. And like all systems and empires that they are created by this system, it eventually collapses. It dies. And they're seeing it as a period of downward, it's on a downward trend. And that's why we see people like Trump, because the system isn't working, so people are abandoning the ideas of the elites and flocking to some guy like Trump because he supposedly challenges the elites, even though he's a part of it. He's just a real good scam artist. And but anyway, it shows that people are sick and tired of the way things are, and they're grasping at straws. And unfortunately, because the left doesn't have a lot of the thinking that we have in Detroit, or Grace and myself and some other people, we haven't been able to put out an alternative vision that people can, that a lot of people that Trump voters could buy into. A lot of them were willing to vote for Bernie Sanders. A lot of them. But since he was pushed out by Clinton, they had no choice but the only alternative they had was Donald Trump. But even Bernie, even though he's radical in many ways, he still supports the capitalist system. So he would kind of slow down the collapse of the system like FDR did in the 30s, but he would not say it's time for a radical revolution of values. To a certain extent, there's some of his thinking is in that general direction, but the very fact that he supported Hillary shows that he's still part of the system.
Yeah, my partner and I, we tend to joke that even though we would have supported Sanders, that he still wasn't far left enough for us, and that, he still has 2 houses. We're not going to lie to ourselves about that. Let's see. So, I think that we're circling around this really provocative idea that if we base our activism around this sort of revolution of values, it has this very strong capacity to bring seemingly disparate groups together, especially whenever we focus on the grassroots and we focus on the ground and what our immediate needs are, instead of trying to go invade other countries. So I guess maybe the next question that I want to ask is, one of the things that I find very, very refreshing about Grace is the way that she not only has a reverence for older activists, but has this sort of like unbridled hope in younger activists, especially the youth in high schools and children. So I guess my next question is, what do older activists have? Well, what do younger activists have to learn from older activists, and what do older activists have to learn from younger activists, or what can each of these groups sort of provide?
Well, she's always talked about a movement that is intergenerational, and I've always agreed with that too. One of the things that caused the 60s to not work very well is this idea that went around, probably provoked by the right wing: don't trust anybody over 30. And that was a stupid thing, because there was a tremendous amount of wisdom among the older people. But it's just a way of dividing the age groups, and to a large extent it worked. And a lot of stupid things happened because they didn't have enough wisdom, basically. Because if you're going to make a revolution, especially in a country as big as this, you got to get everybody involved. I like the writings of Michael Hart and Antonio Negri, especially Multitude, because they are saying that We can't just depend on a vanguard party of a small group of cadres, from factories to lead. Everybody can participate. Everybody can be a part of this movement. It follows right along with the so-called 99% and the 1%. The multitude is everyone, including homeless people, trans people, people that are usually marginalized and are thought that, nobody even talks to, especially very, very poor people. But everybody can be a part of this movement. And we have to involve as many people as possible, including the Trump people. We're not going to get the neo-Nazis most likely, but even a few of those, will defect. Not a bunch, but we do have to welcome them, everybody, even the rich people, because even some of the wealthier people are starting to see, this system is failing. We got to get on the right side of history. Not very many, but eventually the more of them will do that once they start to really collapse. And get me back on the.
The question is, what can different generations learn from each other?
Well, someone like me who's from the 60s and who's learned from the 60s, and someone like Grace, we can let young people know some of the mistakes we made and make sure we don't start repeating them. Unfortunately, I see already that people are starting to repeat some of those same mistakes. Like they're trying to revive the Black Panther Party style of militancy. And also even the American Indian movement, to a certain extent, is stuck in a kind of a top-down, male-dominated style of leadership, militant. And that's didn't work. And even some of the brown berets that are coming back, all these movements from the 60s that are trying to start new groups, but with those old ideas, they're not relevant as much as they used to be. But they're coming out because these ideas of Grace and other thinkers along this line have not spread far enough. And there's a lot of angry people, especially young people out there, but even older people, who will support these militant style groups. Not that I'm saying that I should condemn them, because I don't, but I'm thinking that we need to reach out to them with these new ideas. And this is where a lot of young people have come up with these new ideas and practiced them and started them and tried them out, like Occupy. Occupy was not perfect, obviously. Especially the local Occupy in Tulsa was awful. I was there and they kicked me out. Because I was supposedly an old 60s radical, and even though I wasn't. But they had kind of a hierarchical leaders that did not like to be challenged by anybody else, so they kicked me out and some other people. So those old mistakes that people in the 60s made, people need to know why they made it and why they don't work anymore. And because there's a lot of young people that are coming in who have no political experience whatsoever. They don't know any political history. So they're tending to make the same mistakes, to be rushing, to say that we got to have all these rallies and marches and riots and, smash the state kind of ideas that don't really work, but that kind of fuel. That's what the system would like us to be like. They would like us to be like the 60s. Bombing and rioting and burning down, they would like that because it's easier to combat because they had all the weapons. And of course, all those militant groups, the Weather Underground, Black Liberation Army, none of them succeeded in their goals. Even something like Wounded Knee, which happened in 1973, if it wasn't for the help of black allies, white allies, Latino allies, women, who rallied to their defense, they would have been wiped out. That's the only reason that the army just didn't move in and crush them. And some of the people learned from that by saying that, we got to have allies. And others learned from Martin Luther King, especially in Standing Rock. They realized we can't have a Wounded Knee type situation at Standing Rock. We can't arm ourselves and fight off these people, especially with a guy like Donald Trump in command. He will just smash us if we ever tried that. So they're trying nonviolence, and it seems to be working because they got millions of people supporting them. But there's always a group that says we got to do more They got to be more violent. And you know, some of them did. They like to burn down a couple of trucks at Standing Rock. They don't talk about it that much, but that's a small aspect of AIM type thinking that is still part of the movement. Some people talk about diversity of tactics, you know, letting everybody do what they need to do. And you know, I agree with that. I don't condemn those people. I don't turn them into the police or whatever. But I just say that, you know, there's better ways, there's more effective ways to organize. And right now we're in a period where it's best to use nonviolent tactics. I mean, if Trump comes down with unleashes a Nazi brown shirt type movement from all these militias that start going around killing people, then we have a right to defend ourselves. But that is not happening, and that's hopefully it won't happen. But we do have to be nonviolent, and we do have to reach out to those people on the Trump side and not see them as enemies. Because when you see them as enemies, then they become enemies, and they'll see us as enemies. And we're trying to avoid civil war, because that's a possibility.
I need to take a second to catch my breath. Well, I guess the only question that I have left for you is, why should people in our group read this? Why should people in our group read The Next American Revolution?
Because she talks about a different kind of revolution that everybody can relate to.
Hold on, let's... Okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, could you start over?
She's talking about a different kind of revolution. It's not perfectly clear, but it does depend on nonviolent struggle. It does depend on not confronting the state, not trying to take over the state, but to create an alternative system. Because if we don't create an alternative system, then these right-wing groups will flourish in the vacuum. It's like, you know, when they got rid of regimes in the Middle East, ISIS came in because there was a vacuum. And if we don't have anything in place when the system collapses, then the right-wing militias will swarm out and take over, because they're armed and they're ready. They want to take over, and they have their old values, you know, of top-down authoritarian systems, fascism basically.
Right.
And we're at the point where it could go either way, but it depends on us. If we get our teams together, if we get our thinking clear, we can get organized enough to prevent this from happening. So people are talking about intersectionality, which is similar to some of the ideas that Grace talks about. Intersectionality means that everybody is part of this oppressive system. Everybody has to work together in order to defeat the system, to overcome it or to replace it. So, as Amanda Waterstein says, you know, there's 50% chance that things can be really bad, or they can be relatively good. But it's up to us. If we don't get our act together, it can be really bad. If we sit around, or we all leave for Canada, well, not all of us, but if we just decide we want to escape, either to Canada or to our own little businesses or to a commune out in the woods, or, you know, we have to engage. We have to create. We have to get together if we're going to make this big change that's relatively peaceful. It can be done. I think it can be done. But we have to undergo this radical revolution of values. That's the first step. Decolonizing our thinking. Grace doesn't say that, but her ideas lead in that direction.
Well, thank you very much, Roberto. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
All right, so I guess let's go ahead and stop it. And